A thick, cream-colored envelope landed in Jeffrey Reeves's mailbox, the return address embossed with the name of a wedding planner. He opened it at the kitchen table, pulling out a single sheet of heavy paper. The planner's letter was clinical. Aesthetic continuity and concerns about photographs made his presence unwelcome.
So I am not even a person to them. I am a detail they need to fix.
His phone buzzed with a text from Christopher. "Dad, it's for the best. The Lamberts have a vision. We'll get together after the honeymoon."
Not even a phone call. Not even my name typed out properly.
He placed the phone beside the letter, and for a long while, he simply sat there, hands flat on the wood. The coffee grew cold. He told no one. Jeffrey Reeves had been erased from his own son's wedding with a stroke of a pen. Jeffrey pushed back from the table and walked outside into the sharp afternoon light. 37 years, he'd worked as a union electrician, and that truck had carried him to every job site. Back then, he'd come home with calloused hands and sit at the dinner table with his two boys, listening to their stories.
We were good then.
But Christopher's world had changed. Law school, then the Lamberts, and soon the dinners became fewer. The wedding invitation had arrived months ago, engraved and cold, a symbol of how far he'd climbed away.
He didn't invite me to fittings. Didn't ask my opinion. I was already fading from the picture.
And then there was Daniel. They hadn't spoken since the fight 4 years ago, a fight that started over Christopher's choices and ended in silence. Now both sons were lost to him, each in a different way.
I taught them to work hard and stand tall. In the end, that wasn't enough.
2 days later, in a cramped apartment 2 states away, Daniel Reeves' phone lit up with a cousin's call.
"Hey, it's Ben. What's wrong? You sound spooked."
She told him everything. The embossed letter, the clinical wording, their father erased from the biggest day of his older son's life.
And Christopher just confirmed it. Didn't fight it at all?
Daniel hung up and stood perfectly still, knuckles white around the phone.
4 years since we spoke, and he went through this alone.
He scrolled to a contact buried in his favorites. The photo his father had never changed. A smiling man with silver-brown hair.
He might hang up. He probably should. But I have to try.
In his kitchen, Jeffrey's phone began to buzz against the counter, the screen flashing a name he hadn't seen in 4 years. The silence between them was about to break. Jeffrey's thumb hovered over the screen. Then he answered.
Daniel.
"Dad, I know about the letter. I know. I am getting married. In 3 weeks. Her name is Catherine. She's got no father to walk her in.
Daniel.
It's the same Saturday as Christopher's. I know that's a lot, but she needs a dad, even if it's just for a day."
The same Saturday he was told he wasn't good enough to stand in a photograph. Now, this boy is asking him to stand where it matters. Yes, I'll be there.
That single word, spoken into a phone, broke a silence that had stretched since 2021. He ended the call, walked to his bedroom, and pulled the tan summer suit from its hanger. He folded it into a duffel bag, along with a clean shirt and the union pin he always carried. He had a 12-hour drive ahead, and it started now. He drove through the night, the headlights cutting a tunnel through the dark, and by dawn the hills had risen on both sides.
This road used to feel like home. Now it feels like a dark room where the light switch might not work.
On the passenger seat, a folded map marked the route, his thumbprints smudging the margin.
He'd drive as far as it took. He owed Daniel this, maybe more.
Mid-morning, he pulled into a roadside diner, ordered coffee black, and sat by a window that faced the highway.
What if Catherine looks at me and sees just another stranger? What if I am filling a gap not being a father?
The waitress refilled his cup without asking, and he stared at the steam until the doubt settled into something quiet. An hour later, the Vermont welcome sign appeared through the windshield. Green letters against a backdrop of maple trees.
He was here. He was really here.
He took the exit toward the town Daniel had named, the road narrowing until it felt like a promise or a question mark. The inn appeared at the end of a gravel drive, a white farmhouse with a wraparound porch, and Daniel was already running toward the truck.
"Dad, you came. I was afraid you wouldn't."
I said I would. You don't forget how to be a dad.
On the porch, a young woman in a soft cardigan stepped forward, her hand rising to her heart.
"Mr. Reeves, I've heard so much about you. Thank you for coming all this way for someone you've never met.
Call me Jeffrey. And a girl who needs a dad. That's not a stranger. That's family I haven't met yet.
That evening, the rehearsal dinner was held under strings of lights in the garden, with mismatched plates and laughter that filled the whole clearing.
Are you nervous about tomorrow? Walking me, I mean.
A little. But I've been nervous before every big moment that mattered. That's how you know it's real.
Later, alone by the window of his room, he pressed his fingertips to the glass and watched the stars appear above the maples. He hadn't told anyone about Christopher's wedding on this same Saturday, but the weight of it sat heavy behind his ribs. Dawn broke over the inn with a gentleness that felt intentional, the garden chairs already catching the first light. The wooden arch, woven with wildflowers, waited under the maple canopy. In another state, at an estate with marble floors and gold railings, the morning moved with a colder precision. A place card at the head table read, "Father of the groom," and the chair sat untouched. Jeffrey turned from the window and found a pale envelope on his nightstand. Inside, in Catherine's handwriting, "Thank you for being my dad today."
I haven't earned this, but she's giving it anyway.
He buttoned the tan jacket, slipped the union pin over his heart, and the weight shifted. From a vase by the door, he took the small bouquet Daniel had left. Daisies and lavender, nothing formal, but everything real. He walked the hall to Catherine's door, and this time the silent question in his chest had an answer. He knocked, and the door opened onto Catherine in her lace gown, eyes already bright. She took his arm, her bouquet trembling only a little. The aisle stretched under the maples, and the guests rose, faces turning.
She's here. He kept his word.
Jeffrey's jaw tightened with pride, holding tears back until the job was done. At the altar, he placed her hand in Daniel's and let his touch linger a beat longer. The vows were plain and honest, like promises made for hard weather. The officiant smiled as the ring slipped home, and the guests leaned forward. Daniel kissed her, and the garden filled with a sound that was half applause, half exhale.
He'd walked the right aisle. Whatever happened elsewhere, he'd walked the right aisle.
Daniel grabbed his father's hand and pulled him into the center of the grass, and the fiddle began to wail as the guests clapped.
4 years, son. I thought I'd lost this dance.
Catherine stepped in, and the music shifted to something slower, something that tasted like forgiveness.
Thank you for walking me. I've never had anyone to call Dad.
A phone rose in the crowd, its lens capturing her head pressed to his shoulder. The clip caught a tear sliding down Jeffrey's cheek, past the union pin pinned over his heart. Before the last guest left, Daniel uploaded it. Caption, "My dad." He didn't tag anyone. Simultaneously, in a ballroom with a 4-tier cake, the groom's father's seat remained vacant, the place card untouched. Christopher, mid-sentence in his toast, noticed the phone buzz. He turned it over without a word. The video had 42 views, but by dawn, it would be a current none of them could stop. By morning, the view counter had jumped past 50,000, and comments poured in about a father's quiet dignity. Jeffrey's phone buzzed on the nightstand while he poured coffee for Daniel and Catherine, but he set it face down without a glance.
Today belongs to them. Whatever happened on that screen could wait.
Across states, Christopher sat alone in a dark study, the tuxedo jacket discarded, his thumb pulling the video back to the beginning.
That's my father, smiling like that, for a stranger.
The clip played again, and he caught the union pin, the same one he'd seen every day until he decided it embarrassed him.
I told them he wouldn't fit. I actually said those words to the planner.
He didn't close the browser. He watched until the tear on Jeffrey's cheek froze on screen, and the room felt very cold. The video had crossed state lines and social circles, but Christopher didn't reach out. Not that night, not the next week. The screen stayed frozen on that tear, and somewhere in Vermont, his father was laughing over pancakes, phone still undisturbed. The summer faded. Then autumn. Jeffrey's truck made the drive to Vermont so often the route felt like habit, and the guest room at Daniel's house grew a pair of slippers he'd left behind.
Smells like apple pie in here. You two are bribing me to stay an extra day.
Actually, we had one more reason to keep you around. Catherine's due any day now.
And you are the first person we called. We want you to be here when the baby comes, if that's okay.
2 weeks later, in a quiet hospital room painted in soft blues, a nurse placed a wrapped bundle into Jeffrey's arms.
This little one doesn't care about aesthetic continuity, just holds my finger like it's the whole world.
Dad, we talked about it for months, and there was only one name that felt right. Meet Jeffrey Reeves II.
A simple birth announcement card sat on the hospital nightstand, its small script reading Jeffrey Reeves II and a time-stamped weight.
You gave him my name. After everything, you gave him my name.
Daniel took a single photo on his phone, his father, his wife, and his son, a family that had been lost and found in the space of a single year. Evening found Jeffrey at his kitchen table, a mug of coffee cooling beside him when his phone illuminated with a name he hadn't seen in months. The screen read, "Dad, I am sorry, can we talk?" No ornament, just 9 words from Christopher. Jeffrey picked up the phone, turned it in his palm, and read the words twice.
He waited until the baby was born. The video has been everywhere for half a year.
He typed 4 words, stopped, then typed nothing more. The scent bubble held his reply, plain and final. "I have a son already."
That wasn't cruelty. It was the truth. Hard and spare, and it felt like closing a door with a latch that finally caught.
He set the phone face down on the worn wooden table, the screen darkening. Beside it, a framed photo of Daniel, Catherine, and the baby on their porch. The boy's face, a small mirror of his grandfather's.
One son needed me, the other didn't. That had been made clear on a cream envelope and a Saturday in June. Now it was carved in stone.
He lifted the framed photograph from the table and held it in both hands. The lamplight catching the glass, his thumb moved over the image. Daniel's wide grin, Catherine's gentle eyes, and the baby's tiny hand wrapped around Jeffrey's finger.
This is what chose him back. Not a bloodline obligation, but a hands-open invitation.
He set the frame down carefully, then reached into his pocket and pulled out the union pin. The metal was worn smooth, the engraving faint after 37 years, but the weight of it still felt like a promise.
They said I wasn't made for photographs, but this pin was made for a man who never stopped working.
In his mind, the Vermont garden appeared, empty now, chairs stacked under the maples, the aisle swept clean. That was the day he'd stopped being the father who wasn't enough and became the father who showed up. He looked back at the photograph on the table, and for the first time in months, he let the quiet settle without waiting for it to break.
I have a son already, and a grandson. That door is closed, but this one is wide open.
The photograph Daniel took moved to the front of the house, not on a mantle, but propped beside the coffee maker where the morning light struck it first. It captured no aisle, no vows, just 3 faces leaning into one another, and the baby's fist closed around Jeffrey's thumb on his desk. His union card yellowed behind glass, edges curled, its date still legible, 37 years of proof that worth isn't stitched into a label. In Vermont, the garden stood empty now, chairs returned, the arch taken down, but the ground still held the shape of the Saturday that shifted everything. Because what happened, there wasn't simply a ceremony. It was a father being handed back his reason for standing. He didn't need to defeat Christopher. Defeat would have meant staying in a war he hadn't started. Instead, he walked a different aisle, gave away a different bride, and accepted a different name. The union pin lay beside the photograph now, 2 icons of a life that refused to apologize for its calluses. If anyone asked about the cream envelope or the text he'd sent in reply, Jeffrey would only shake his head and let the silence speak. Because his answer wasn't in words anymore. It was in the boy who carried his name. But the moment the world saw wasn't the ceremony. It was the walk. From behind, the slow stride up the grass aisle became the story's heartbeat. A man in a tan suit and a girl in white lace, moving towards something neither had expected. Jeffrey's face in that close-up told the whole truth. The jaw set, the eyes that held steady because weeping would have undone the job.
If I stumble, she stumbles, so I won't stumble.
When he placed Catherine's hand in Daniel's, the camera caught the tiny tremble in his fingers before he pulled back and stood straight. The video that spread wasn't the dance, it was the walk. replayed millions of times, often paused right where the Union pin caught the sun. Strangers wrote that they'd never seen a man so quietly proud, and comments flooded in about fathers they'd lost, fathers they'd chosen, and fathers who never came back. By the time the clip had circled the globe, Jeffrey Reeves had become a symbol, and the phrase aesthetic continuity became a quiet punchline no one in his family ever needed to utter. But the frame that mattered most was the one where his eyes met Catherine's for half a second, and she smiled as if she'd known him her whole life. That was the image the world couldn't stop sharing, because it answered a question the cream envelope had asked: what is a father worth? The reply walked down a maple aisle in Vermont. Christopher's memory of that Saturday was not the music or the toasts, but the vacant chair at the head table. The place card had been removed by the planner, but the absence itself became a monument. His wedding had cost more than a house, but the photographs felt brittle within a week. Night after night, he sat in the dark study, the video looping on his phone.
That's my father, smiling like that. For a stranger.
His wife found him at 3 in the morning, the screen's glow carving hollows under his eyes. She didn't say a word, just watched him scroll.
He'd told the planner his father wouldn't fit. Those were his words. And now the whole world had seen him fit better than any of them.
He let the months pile like unpaid debts. Unable to dial, unable to dial, unable to forget. The birth announcement arrived in the mail. A tiny card with a name that stung: Jeffrey Reeves II. That night, he finally opened the message thread and typed 5 words, his thumb shaking. Back in Vermont, the winter gave way to mud season, and the baby's first smile was recorded on everyone's phone. Jeffrey arrived every other weekend, his truck recognizable by the new car seat strapped in the back. He'd lift the boy from his carrier and hum the same off-key tune he'd hummed when his own sons were small.
You are spoiling him, Dad.
That's the job description.
He reaches for your glasses now. I think he knows who you are.
Daniel snapped another photo, this time of Jeffrey reading a cardboard book, the boy's hand slapping the page. They printed that one and put it in a frame beside the birth announcement that still carried the name Jeffrey Reeves II.
You know, we could make the guest room permanent. It's just a closet away from being yours.
Maybe, but for now, I'll just keep coming back.
The reply arrived on Christopher's screen in the same thread where he'd once typed, "It's for the best, it's for the best." He read the words once, then again, and the phone slipped onto the desk with a quiet thud.
I have a son already. He didn't even say goodbye, just stated a fact I helped make true.
He sat there while the room grew dark, the screen's glow the only light, and the finality of those 4 words settled into the silence. In Vermont, the afternoon sun stretched across the living room floor, and Jeffrey turned the page of a picture book. The baby reached for his glasses, and Jeffrey let him pull them off without a word. On the mantel, the framed photo of the porch day sat beside the birth announcement, 2 proofs of a life that had rerouted itself toward grace.
You are thinking about him, aren't you?
I am thinking about you, about this. That's the whole point.
The Union pin glinted on the shelf, and Jeffrey didn't check his phone again. The baby slept with Jeffrey's thumb in his fist, the hold light as a breath. On the shelf above, the Union pin glinted in the slanting afternoon light.
I used to measure my worth in paychecks and wire gauges. Now it's the weight of a small hand.
He freed his thumb gently and walked to the window. The maple trees were stripped bare, but the shape of the wedding arch still hung in his memory like a watermark.
Christopher will figure it out, or he won't. That door is not mine to knock on anymore.
He picked up the framed photograph of Daniel's family and the Union pin, holding them together in the quiet.
They call this an heirloom, but the only thing I ever inherited was showing up.
A smile settled, undemanding and real, the kind that doesn't need applause. He placed both back on the mantel and returned to the sofa, where the baby stirred and reached up again. The video kept moving while the baby slept, gathering new weight with every share. Strangers stitched their own stories into the comments. Daughters left out, stepfathers who stepped in. A teacher described signing permission slips for a boy with no family, an invisible aisle walked daily. Aesthetic continuity became shorthand for exclusion, dressed in elegant language, a warning shared between friends. The press called it revenge, but it was simpler. A man who showed up when invited. The Union pin became an emblem for millions, who worked with their hands. Jeffrey never saw the tributes. He watched only the small face that lit at his voice. Daniel's original post stayed pinned, a single photograph that outlasted a 4-tier cake. The empty chair remained unfilled, a symbol of a choice that could not be undone. The envelope's question was answered. A father's worth is a walk down a maple aisle. On the first warm evening, they sat on the porch as the sun dropped behind the maples. The baby curled against Jeffrey's chest, fingers tangled in the collar of his faded work shirt. The union pin was pinned to that same collar, and Catherine reached over to straighten the shirt without a word.
Worth the drive?
Every mile.
The words held no anger, no residue. They just landed, and the quiet that followed was full. In the garage, his tool belt hung untouched, the old hard hat gathering dust. They were relics now, but not forgotten, proof of a life that built conduits into walls and boys into men. Catherine leaned her head on Daniel's shoulder, and Jeffrey watched the horizon swallow the light. He didn't need to be in anyone's wedding. He'd already walked the one that mattered. In the end, the garden in Vermont returned to silence. The arch was gone, the chairs stacked, the petals swept away, but the ground remembered the weight of a man who walked with a girl who needed a father. Across the state line, an empty chair gathered dust, a placeholder for a choice that couldn't be undone. But Jeffrey Reeves never looked at that chair again. He measured his worth by the small hand that reached for his glasses, and the name that had been given back to him. A father isn't the man who stands in the photograph. He's the one who shows up before the camera clicks, and in the quiet of that Vermont evening, Jeffrey Reeves was every inch a father. The story traveled, but the heart of it stayed simple. A father walked his daughter down an aisle, and some aisles, once walked, lead home forever.